I see abundance and when I tune into the energy of money, the first download I've ever had about abundance and money was like, I saw it like a river and it was like this beautiful sparkling river. It's actually continuously flowing and it flows through our veins. It flows through our being and it's literally is always there. When I communicate with money, like I feel it loves to dance. It loves to flow. It loves to be in partnership. Like I always imagine this beautiful dancing in like a ballroom. Like that's how I see the partnership with money.
Put up your mask, let down your guard, and let's talk about the real. This is the Bring Your Own Mask podcast. All right, guys, my guest, Viola Hug, is a channel and a psychic business coach. She's so amazing. I mean, she's a best-selling author. She's also a host of the global charted Spirit, Sex, Money podcast. I mean, I cannot wait to get into these types of topics with her today. What I love about her most is that she actually works with high-level spiritual leaders, activating expansion of their soul, their wealth, and their impact through spirituality, pleasure, as well as strategy. I'm so excited. Welcome to the show, Viola.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited you are here. You know, I've never actually interviewed someone in regards to pleasure and sex. And so I'm so excited to get into these topics with you today.
Yeah, I know. Me too. It's total masks off conversation.
Hence, bring your own mask, right? So I was actually on your Instagram before we hopped on, and I really loved your recent post. It was a quote. It said, "Fear shows up to elevate you, not to lead you." And it reminded me so much of what I just experienced this past week. I recently, quick story, did MDMA with my fiance, and it was our first time doing it in that kind of setting. And it was terrifying. Like you would think that it's a heart opener, which it was, but it was also terrifying all at the same time. And I really believe I'm still recovering from it. So when I saw that quote, I was like, oh my gosh, Viola really spoke to me because, you know, fear really does show up to push you to that next level. So can you kind of tell me more about what inspired you to write that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a concept that I see come up a lot because I talk about this concept of working with our soul and our human. Right? Because though I'm very much in the spiritual realm, I have such a love and reverence for the fact that we are human. And there's so many parts of our human that are amazing. Like we get to experience pleasure through our human and all of the things that we really desire to experience, whether it be hugging our partner or eating delicious food or watching a sunset or having a family. Like all of those things are things we experience because of our human. But oftentimes we like condemn parts of ourselves for being human, like the ego thoughts, the fears, the doubts, the societal conditioning, which is really a big piece of what we're here to heal and transmute and become aware of, right? It's part of the purpose, I feel. And so I see this dance happen where we really have to be able to honor both. Where I see people get caught is that they see the fear and they suddenly let it lead them, right? They let the fear or the doubt make decisions for them. They say, I'm scared to speak vulnerably, so I'm not going to, versus understanding that that fear is just showing you where you're currently about to have a breakthrough, where you're challenging limiting beliefs or societal conditioning. And the soul is obviously kind of giving you this inspiration to share something vulnerable because it is correct for you and it's liberating for you and it's healing and powerful for you. So it really is just a reminder that when we feel things like that, we are totally allowed to honor them. We are totally allowed to recognize where we're being challenged to grow. We are allowed to feel whatever feelings come along with that. And in fact, I encourage you to nourish that. But it's our soul that we're meant to be led by, not the fear, not the human. So we experience through the human, but we are led by the soul. And that's really the ultimate message of that.
I love that so much because so many of us are led by fear. And sometimes I almost feel like we tend to not even recognize that it's there, right? We're so used to it just kind of taking control and we don't really actually sit there and feel the fear and be like, oh, wait, it's here. Okay. Okay, well, now it's here. Now what do I do with it, right? Our society has taught us to be like, oh, it's fearful. Like, let's react right away. Right. So speaking of fear, I really love for us to let's just put down our guard, go deeper, and let's put on our mask and let's talk about the real.
Let's do this.
How do you feel about putting on a mask on a podcast?
You know what? I was excited about this since you first told me about it because I was like, this is going to be so weird and awesome.
So yeah, I was going to with
Oh
you.
my gosh.
I'm excited to see your mask.
I'm like totally doing this out of order because I just realized that I forgot to put my hair up before I put the face mask on my face. This is like a salicylic acid mask that I'm putting on. So I can't remember what it does, but apparently it's really good for you. Yeah, it's like charcoal.
So it's supposed to like pull all of your impurities like to the surface, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly that. I'm only going to put it here. I'm not putting it on my forehead today, but
Okay, perfect. Well, that actually leads me to my next question. Viola, can you tell us, how did you get into all of this? Tell us your journey because it's interesting.
I know that you mentioned like that you're excited to talk about pleasure with me. And that's a big piece of what I do. I'd say like a huge pillars for me are abundance, spirituality, and pleasure. And they happened in that order, my breakthroughs. I've always been a relatively inspired child, human. Like my whole childhood, I had this like sensation, dream, vision of big things. And I went through a lot of trauma and a lot of really hard things, particularly my teen years. And it kind of left me a little bit beat up by the time I got to my 20s, to the point where I knew in my heart that there was still more, but I was really challenged by my own inner demons, right? Like I was doing a lot of self-sabotaging behavior. I was very self-destructive. I was, in a way, like I feel so much compassion for that version of me now, because she really just wanted to be loved and witnessed, and she was doing anything to get that attention, kind of thing, right? And so I had like a really big turning moment where I really got to the end of my rope and I decided like, I cannot live like this. Like either I don't or I change. And I decided to get counseling, and I, through a series of events, met my partner. And then that led me to finishing a degree. I actually studied Bachelor of Science in Human Nutrition and Sports and Exercise Science. So that's fun, very sciencey. But then I finished my degree and then I didn't want a job. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I went down that track, and I say I was like a struggling entrepreneur for about 5 years, where I was really trying to figure myself out. And that time though, I was so desiring success. But at that point, what I didn't know at the time is I was desiring to be externally validated. I wanted people at my high school to finally think that I was cool. I wanted to feel loved and seen by people. I wanted to feel good enough. I wanted to be able to prove whatever. And so a lot of it was so externally based that I ended up not feeling any sort of fulfillment from anything that I was doing. I was like hitting goals in the first part of that journey, but was feeling so empty and so burnt out and so tired. And then it's like my world kind of flipped upside down in terms of my business. And I started going into debt so bad that I was in over 6 figures of debt, and I'm like working harder than I ever thought I could. I was hustling harder than ever. I was doing everything by the book of like what I call old paradigm business, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And so I was almost like forced into this like abundance and spiritual awakening. Like it was kind of a mix of both because they're very interrelated, but I realized that nothing that I was doing was changing it. So what could I do? Right. So I started learning about the energy of money. I started learning about the law of attraction. I started learning about these things in a more deeper way and really practicing them in my life. And then through that, I got to this point where I really truly could feel abundance, but not a lot had changed my external circumstance. And through some divine timing and my big spiritual awakening, where my psychic gifts opened up fully, I decided to launch a coaching business. And I was like, this is it. And my commitments were, I was going to launch a coaching business, but I was going to throw everything that I knew about business away. I was going to follow my intuition, no matter how scary. I said my spirit team was my first business coach. I was going to work with my energetic alignment, right? Masculine and feminine energy, human design, all the modalities that I knew I could to support me, as well as like shadow work and all of that. And I was going to do whatever the F I wanted in my business. I was not going to follow anybody else's strategy. And I know this is kind of long-winded, but it's a long-winded story. And then through that, within my first year of that business, my husband and I sold all of our belongings, started traveling full time. I scaled my business to consistent 10K months and then beyond. My business went to multiple 6 figures while I was still traveling. I got pregnant. I moved to Canada, I had a baby. And then after that is when I had sort of my next level awakening into sexuality and pleasure. And even though it's something that I practiced in small ways, it became so obvious why it's a core piece of expansion, of growth, and of fulfillment in our lives. And so that kind of like married its way into my work.
Oh my gosh, I am getting chills because first of all, I actually didn't know that you had a kid. I'm so sorry, but I love your story because it came from science in a sense, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And now you're really into spirituality. And it's almost as if you kind of went this full circle and you were able to kind of dip your toes into both arenas. And that makes your journey just so much more valuable because you're able to see both sides. And
Mhm.
that I love that you said in the beginning of business, you were focusing all of your attention on external validation. And I think
Mhm.
most of our listeners have agreed upon like that has happened to them or they're
Mhm.
happening to them right now. So
Mhm.
speak more upon what exactly made you realize that aha, like, you know what, I actually have to turn inward instead.
To me, it was money, right? Like that's the thing is that I was chasing this like idea of earning a particular amount of income. And it was like that was all my goals. And I mean, I'm still a very financially like excited person. I love money and I love the idea of making money and being in partnership with money in this world. And that excites me. But at the time, it was like that was the thing I think I needed to do in order to finally feel abundant or successful or worthy. And so
Mm.
it kind of hit me over the head when I was brave enough. And I say brave enough because it took every ounce of courage for me at that time to be able to face the idea that I needed to look at my money on a closer level. I was too scared to check my bank accounts back then because it was bad news every time I did. I was like avoiding phone calls because the banks were calling me all of the time because we weren't paying our shit because we couldn't, because we weren't making money. Oh, and I remember this. We heard from somebody before, my husband and I, right? We heard from somebody say that money that you have is a reflection of your like set point for money and abundance. And we got triggered AF. Like we were like, that's not true. It's just a financially hard, but we are so much better than. And then that kind of stuck with me, that kind of shame that I felt around. Then I was like, holy crap, like maybe I actually do have something to investigate here. Cause why would that upset me so much that they weren't even comparing worth, but that's what it felt like, you know, my worth with my money. And so when I decided to read this book, it was called Money, a Love Story. And it was like all about kind of like the energy of money as well as the actual like budgeting and whatever. And I remember thinking, so if money's an energy, and then I started really familiarizing myself with the term abundance and understanding how abundance is more than just money, but it is a huge part of money. I started to see that it was actually more so about how we felt. And that's when that change started to happen, is when I allowed myself to feel abundant before I ever saw an external circumstance. And I tell you what, sometimes I say my past self would punch me in the face if I gave the advice that I give now. But it's because when I was so desperate, I wanted somebody to be like, do this, 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 and then you'll be successful.
Yeah.
But the inner work is what changes our external experience. And I had to allow myself to find ways to be grateful for exactly what I had and start feeling worthy with exactly what I had and without needing anything else in my world. And the minute that I was able to do that is when my whole life changed.
Oh, I love that so much because you have no idea how many times when I'm coaching my clients, you know, they're just asking me, Kristen, just give me the strategy. Just tell me the.
Yeah.
And here I am seeing like I can just
Mhm.
intuitively feel like there's so many blocks in the forefront and that we have to tackle that first before we can even do this strategy, right? And it doesn't
Mhm.
make sense to the typical, you know, business like paradigm, right? Like in that
Yeah.
form, but it makes so much sense when you're actually experiencing it. And that actually brings me to my next question, which is, you know, can you explain what abundance and wealth consciousness mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I see abundance and when I tune into the energy of money, because I like to say that I like communicate with the spirit of money, and it's like an energy that is very flowing. The first download I've ever had about abundance and money was like I saw it like a river, and it was like this beautiful sparkling river. And you can like imagine your abundance river however you want, but it's actually continuously flowing and it flows through our veins, it flows through our being, and it's It's like this beautiful river, this beautiful flowing of energy that literally is always there. When I communicate with money, like I feel it loves to dance, it loves to flow, it loves to be in partnership. Like I always imagine this like maybe waltzing or something. I don't know, like just beautiful dancing in like a ballroom. It's like that's how I see the partnership with money, where it's just like flowing and you like, change partners and it's just like this whole beautiful flow. And beyond that though, it's because it's this real natural energy we have within ourselves. It's our birthright. It's a part of who we are already. The problem is that we often create limitations around why we don't have it, or we create blocks against accessing it because we think it has something to do with our external experience. And so I really see it as an ability or an energy to tap into, to realize, to own, and to feel within us, where we always know we'll be supported, where we feel like everything's enough and anything more we'll ever need will be there. And every time that we give, it's amplified and comes back for more. It's like, ultimately, I believe it's a trust in our support, which, is so hard to do for anybody, but depending on our backgrounds, it can be so varied. It can be so different, right? Depending on the levels of oppression or the experiences that we've had or how we've grown up, like our challenges to really, really be able to trust are varied hugely. I really, really recognize that. But learning that is possible for everyone because it's a feeling more than anything else.
Yeah, 100%. I love that you said the analogy of dancing, because imagine like you're a conductor in the middle of a traffic intersection. So if you are stopping traffic on one side, you're stopping the flow of money, right? It's kind of like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I love your analogy of money, the waltzing and that you're changing partners. And it's true, right? Because money is not supposed to just stay with you forever.
Mhm.
You're supposed to be giving it to someone else and it comes back to you.
And it always is. It's just whether we choose to recognize that being abundant or we see that as scarcity, as constricting, right? Because the thing is, sometimes I hear people say, like, oh, well, I made this much, but then I had to spend it on this, 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 and this. So it doesn't count. And I was like, okay. But it's like, if you spent that money on a new pair of shoes or on a date night or on this, would it count then? Like, when does money count? Right. And spoiler alert, part of really tapping into limitless abundance is understanding that it always counts and having gratitude no matter how it's flowing. But it's flowing all the time, whether you're paying for your necessities and your expenses, whether you're paying for fun things, wherever the money's coming from. It's just like it's coming and it's going all of the time. And we don't need to be scared about that, right? Like I know sometimes when we're like about to make an investment or something, it can feel so scary. But if you witness in any other area of your life, it's just like it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes. You can trust yourself.
Yeah. And before we actually take off our masks, I'm starting to feel my mask harden a little bit.
I know, I'm just like looking because mine's a timed mask. I think I need to take it off in a second.
Yeah. So it's so funny though, because this is actually teaching me something, because when we wear our mask too long, it starts to harden, right? And just like in reality, when you start to get attached to the role that you play, it starts to be part of you and you can't take it off anymore. So before we take off our mask, I just would like to ask one last thing, which is about your book, right? So I know that, you're an expert on all things money and magnetism and even sexuality. Can you share with the audience just like a tidbit from your book and what they can actually get away from it if they get it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my book is called You Are an Abundant Babe. And I wrote this when I was like in the midst of my digital nomad life. And it is really how to tap into this energy of abundance in our life and amplify it. So it doesn't really matter where you're at in terms of how much money you earn, like whether you feel like you earn a lot or a little, because it's subjective anyway. But it's really about this energy of abundance and how to feel really truly embodied, how to support our spirit, our energy, and our mindset. So I go through like 8 main pillars, through from the choices that we make through to how to start shifting your perspective on different aspects of your life, how to really navigate when you are going through a tough situation, and how to, without bypassing, be able to still be in alignment with the abundance that you desire. Because, like I was talking about before, it's just like we can feel emotions as humans and hard things, but that doesn't mean it's pulling us out of alignment. I know sometimes we fear that, especially in the spiritual community, that it's like law of attraction, we're going to attract negative things if we focus on those things, but sometimes those things just need to be dealt with and it's fine. And I talk straight through to then how that shows up in our business and our purpose. So it's very, very well-rounded. It's very simple and easy to read and funny, if I may add. And every single chapter has an integration guide of how to actually apply everything that I teach into your life.
I love that so much. So for those of you listening, I will attach Viola's book in the description. So without further ado, let's actually take this mask off because I can start to
Yes.
feel it harden. And I really want to get deeper with you, right? Because taking off our mask can often be kind of scary, right? We tend to cling on to who we are, the roles that we play, the beliefs that we have. So I'd love to ask you vulnerably, what were some of your deepest limiting beliefs that stopped you from becoming the person you are today?
Oh my goodness. There's so much to this story. And I think like if I'm speaking vulnerably, this is something that I don't think just goes away. Right. Like I feel like a lot of our fears come back multiple times. Like I always say, we learn and heal in layers. And so a lot of those early fears still exist within me. It's just I navigate them differently and there's different layers of healing. And so one of the first fears that I had was my own value. Like, do I even have anything to share? Like, what's the value of my life, my story? It's so boring. It's so plain. Like, why would anybody pay me? Why would anybody want to hear what I have to say? Will people find me interesting? And it went down to like this idea of worth, but not just like worthiness, because it's like in some way we all know we're worthy, but it's like, how do we be so devoted to that knowing that we're meant for it that we are willing to move past a lot of those fears. I'm kind of going on this random side tangent in a way, but it feels relevant. It's coming through. But yeah, so it's like this fear that I really have anything to share and that my voice is valuable. And I've dealt with that fear at almost every stage, like every up level in my business. And so I continually have to work on that one.
I'm so curious now because, I really love that you talked about how you felt like you weren't valuable or like, in a sense, like maybe at the very core, we know that we're valuable because we're here on earth, but I
Yeah.
get it because I went through the same exact thing, but I'm
Yeah.
curious about your personal story. Can you share with us maybe a moment in your business that was really scary for you and you had to break through it? Like walk us through that story.
Yeah. So when I first started my business, I was teaching and doing kind of like alignment work. So I was working a lot with my intuition and I was helping people get aligned with their vision, like find areas in their life that they weren't aligned and then like pull that in. And I always knew that I eventually would be working with people with money. I just knew because of everything I'd been through. And I was like, I know this is part of my purpose. So I'm going to eventually help people with abundance and money. I'm going to help people with business. It was like a huge desire of mine. And so when my business actually started becoming successful and I started having people come up to me and be like, can you business coach me? I was like, oh, yes, I can. And I was like getting really excited about that. But then suddenly I noticed this feeling where I felt like I should already be at 10K months, right? Like, cause that felt like where you're seen as good, right? This is the same fear of external validation coming in again. On the other hand, like I felt like I also deserved to be at that point already because I'd been already an entrepreneur for like 6 years at that point. Like I was new in my business, but I'd been doing business for a long time. And so I've kind of like started to feel this like I should be at that level. And so what started to happen is like integrity is one of my highest values. So never ever would I speak as if I'd already achieved a goal that I hadn't achieved. But I was like almost trying to act like that in my own energy, like because I wanted it so bad. And so it was like I would try to speak to people who were wanting to create that or like whatever, right? Like I was just showing up in my business in a different way because of this fear that it wasn't valuable if you weren't already earning 10K or it wasn't interesting or it wasn't good enough. And so, yeah, I was like really stuck in this place and I was still obviously having results because my business was like growing really fast at that point, but it wasn't like to the point where again, I thought I should be all these shoulds. And then I hired my first coach. I remember it was like my first or second session with her. I said to her, I was just like, I really want to be at the point, like my goal is to be making 10K and to be helping other people make 10K months in their business. And she was just like, okay, well, where are you at now? And I was at like, I think I just had my first month working with her. I had 5K and the month before that was like a 3K month or something. And so I told her that and she was like, okay. And she's like, and what have you done really well in your business? And I was like, well, I've started my business. I found what I want to do. Like I've helped people do this and this. I did it. And she's like, why don't you help people do that? And I like had this big aha moment where I didn't have to try to be where I thought I had to be. I got to feel proud of and own exactly where I was and still be open to receiving the more that I wanted, right? Because a part of me thought that if I just was like, okay, well, I help people start their business, then I would be stuck at that level and I would never be able to break through. And I was like so wrong. And it was so obvious to me as soon as she said it, but I was so in my head about like, I should already be there and what I have isn't enough and what I have isn't interesting and what I have isn't valuable, that I couldn't even see the value until she was just like, well, what do you have? And how can you be proud of that? And I was like, oh, duh. And then I suddenly felt this like urge of inspiration and I launched my program. It's available as self-study now. I don't do it live anymore, but it was called Soulful Business Academy. It was all about helping people start a business, and for people who are maybe already at the start of their business, set it up so that it was scalable and that it was heart-centered and soulful and abundant and all of these different things. And that program, like I need to look at the numbers, but it's, in terms of like how much money I've made from a single offer, it's probably one of my most highest ones. And with that program, it was also the program that I had my first 10K launch with, not in the first round, but I think in my second or third round of that program, I had my first ever 10K launch. And, you know, that was actually the program that broke me through to 10K months. So it was kind of ironic. But it was just so beautiful that the minute that I could just like own the value and trust that what I had was enough and I was good enough exactly where I was the minute that I actually hit that next level that I wanted to hit.
I love that so much because oftentimes it's our most vulnerable feelings or moments that we actually quantum leap into that next level, right? Because most of the time we're just so afraid of looking at that vulnerability, and for you to sit with that and to really embrace that was when you had your biggest breakthrough, which I love. It brings me wondering, when did sexuality come into your business? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. So when I first started my business, I was already kind of aware that this was an area that I was really interested in and that I knew had a lot of value. And I was doing a lot of my own work around, but I kind of got sidetracked a little bit just because of personal things that were happening in my own life. So it was kind of like always there a little bit. So in terms of like, I knew that shame around sexuality was not supporting me in my life. Like I knew that, and I did a little bit of work on it, like to the point where I felt more comfortable talking to my partner about it, which seems like it should be normal, but it's like I felt shame saying some things. And I mean, I read the book Pussy Reclamation by Regina T. I don't remember how to pronounce her last name, but like I read that book and it was just like this whole new world to me. And so I started like noticing the power of it. And I started becoming aware of and practicing in my own life how important pleasure and sexuality really is to our ability to receive, and how shame is like really not something we should be carrying with us all the time. And this is like even this example that I just gave about my business, where I said it was like I almost felt shame about where I was or that I didn't have more. And shame is often a portal like to our biggest healing and our biggest breakthrough, because as soon as we bring shame to light, it dissipates. And obviously there's going to be a gift there, because if we're no longer healing shame around something, then it's going to have a different emotion or different experience attached to it. So I had all of this, and then it kind of went on the back burner a little bit. Then I got pregnant and I was super sick during my pregnancy. I had HG, which is essentially just like severe nausea and vomiting every day for 42 weeks that I was pregnant. So it was super intense. And so I was kind of like dealing with a lot of other things. But then after I had my baby, it kind of just all came back to me. And I think because as becoming a mom, I just, you know, we're raising our child with a lot of conscious parenting, and we think about things, we think so much more. So it's like every thought that I had, I kind of questioned, and is this a thought that I want to pass over to my child? And just how spirit works, you know, it was really bringing sexuality and pleasure back into my awareness just through thinking about it, through seeing different things, seeing it be talked about, having desires, having a lot of shame coming up for myself. And so when that started coming through so heavily, like I knew that's something that I didn't want to pass on to my child, is shame around sexuality. And so I just knew I had to look into this a little bit more. And so I just like opened myself up to exploring it a little bit more. And then that's when I started to like, everything made sense tenfold. It was like my purpose of abundance and spirituality and all that stuff that I was doing and like helping people create amazing legacies made sense. And the minute pleasure came into it, I was like, this is so good, because pleasure is like our portal to actually truly enjoying our life. It is the same energy of receiving money, right, as receiving pleasure. And pleasure is sexual or non-sexual, right? It's just literally the experience of being an enjoyment inside of our body. Then it started to make sense to me about how it like increases your capacity to hold more, and how through shadow work, pleasure is like a transmuter. You imagine like those games or movies where like there's like those screens and everything starts starts like clicking into place and parts are moving and flying through the air. That's literally what it was like for me. And on one level, it's like, how can you be truly in ownership of who you are and believe in your value and trust yourself and be led if you're suppressing a part of yourself because you feel shame around it? Right? Like, and that's true about whether it's our sexuality or whether it's a part of our personality or whether it's a part of the way we look, like whatever aspect of ourselves it is, if we feel like one place isn't good enough, we're not fully liberated. We're not fully showing up in our most authenticity. And I know that the more we come back to who we truly are and truly in ownership of just our energy and our soul's expression, the easier success becomes.
Yeah.
Because we're already coded for success, right? We already innately are abundance and success. So the more we strip back those layers, the easier we have access to that energy. And so that was like the biggest breakthrough for me. But now it's just like, it's makes so much sense and why it's so embodied into all of my work, because it's such an expander, really, at the end of the day.
Throughout our whole conversation, I mean, everything was really good. But I think what really stuck to me the most was when we talked about shame and sexuality, because I was not expecting you to say any of that, right? Because I remember when I was like wanting guests on my show and I was like thinking about people, I was like, you know what? I've never talked to anyone about sex like so vulnerably online and how it relates to money. But the way you put it just right now made so much sense. And I literally feel like my mind is so blown because I never connected like sensuality and pleasure with the same feeling as like money and pleasure, right? Like I've always felt like it was kind of separate because it like I was never taught to talk about sex in my family. Like that was like,
Neither. Yeah.
forbidden, right? So that leads me to one of my last questions, which is, can you share with us like a tangible like ritual that you would do with, sex and money? I know that like energy and spiritual is never like really step by step, but just something like that listeners can take away from.
Yeah. So this practice is like so layered. And I feel like the different practices that we have when it comes to pleasure and receiving abundance and all of these things, there's so many easy ways that we can tap into it. And then there's also more like active and like self-pleasure, for example. Like we can use self-pleasure as a ritual and a way to manifest. And there's things like orgasmic manifestation, where like how fun does life get to be when you really shame around that and you can just play with your sexual energy. Like that's really fun. But then even in smaller ways, it's like understanding that our womb space, and I'm speaking to anybody who identifies as feminine, and if you were born with feminine anatomy, like female anatomy, but really it's like it doesn't matter what's kind of gone on in your life, like whether you menstruate or not, whether you have the parts or not, like that sacral center still exists within you and it still holds incredible power. So that part of our body, the womb space, is the home of receptivity. It is the home of creation. It is the home of emotions. It is the home of expansion, right? And we can think of so many physical examples like pregnancy, right? Like we can think of birth. We can think of menstruation, the cyclical energy, but it also holds our DNA, right? It's emotions. There's like so much tied together there. And so when we start to focus energy and intention on this area, we actually allow a lot of healing and a lot of inspiration and creativity and pleasure to come through. So a really, really simple practice that you can do that's so gentle to awakening this energy within you is sitting in a meditative position, whether you're laying down or sitting down, and just holding your hand on your womb, like on your lower belly, about 2 inches below your belly button. You can also hold one hand on your heart if that feels correct for you, and start to breathe energy. And when you're breathing, you're literally imagining the breath moving right down into your womb and expanding your womb. You can imagine light expanding in this area. And literally just like repeating words or affirmations or visualizations that are just allowing, like, I'm safe to receive, I'm safe to experience pleasure, I'm safe to be abundant, I'm safe to explore, my limits of sexuality or pleasure or joy, because that's what a lot of this comes down to as well, is being able to push ourselves beyond our limits of what we think is possible with our own joy, pleasure, abundance, gratitude, right? Is like, how can we feel it and hold it for a little bit longer? So we get into this feeling, maybe you're flooding your body and your emotions with just like pleasure, which can be gratitude. Like, if you think about it, if you feel really grateful, you feel tingles, you feel warmth, you feel expansion, you feel this feeling. You can, in your head, be like, oh yeah, that's literally pleasure in my body. That's a good feeling in my body, right? That takes away sometimes the stigma of it. It's just like good feelings. So, oh my God, I'm feeling good feelings in my body right now. And how can you hold that for a little bit longer? You like, even if you hold your breath and you're just like, I'm going to feel it for a minute longer, one breath longer, one inhale longer, 1 second longer. And just playing with that is actually increasing your capacity for more wealth and abundance and pleasure and joy and everything.
Wow.
So it's like womb breathing, right? So simple, but so, so, so powerful.
Okay, so everyone do that tonight. I'm going to definitely do that tonight because, again, this is never a connection I've ever made. So I will definitely do that. So one of my last questions is, what are you most excited about this year? What kind of projects are you launching? What can people follow you and like be excited about for?
Oh, I'm so excited about this year because my baby just turned 1. And it feels like, honestly, like a full circle of integration post baby, right? Like a fully feeling so like excited about my purpose. Like there's different dynamics now. We have like family help and we moved somewhere that's like so beautiful now. So my life has just like gone through this massive transition. And so I have been bringing a lot of new offers. Prior to 2021, I actually archived all of my previous programs, which are all amazing, but they're all self-study courses now. And I'm bringing amazing, fresh new programs out. Like I have a program that I launched earlier this year on the wild woman archetype and how that is so powerful for our liberation. I have the Rich Witch program, which is my spiritual money program. I have a program called Irresistibility, which is about bringing this energy, like full embodiment into our energy, into our business and social media, and just a lot. Anything that's coming from me is essentially going to help you expand your capacity for more wealth and abundance and joy, and like actually finding joy in your business and your life together in a very spiritual, pleasure-filled, and tangible, strategic way. So there's so much that I can't even fully tell you. Do you know human design? I think we talked about this before. Yeah, I'm a manifestor in human design. So like what I come up with is like fresh and new and amazing all of the time. But I work with people from 101 to masterminds to group programs. And I also have a membership. So there's a lot of varied ways to work together.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm a projector. So I feel like this is such a great relationship, at least on this podcast, because I just like I have these questions for you and like, and I just love how you're just glowing with all of your offers. And it's just so exciting. I mean, for everyone that wants to work with Viola, I'm going to put the links in the description below. Viola, can you share with us, where do you hang out most and where can people hang out with you?
So Instagram is one of my favorite hangouts. I'm at Viola Hug. I'm at Viola Hug on pretty much any social media. So wherever you hang out, come find me, say hello. Always more than happy to say hello back. I also have a Facebook group called Soulpreneurs Spirit Sex Money. I have a podcast called Spirit Sex Money, which is like, it's so funny when that name channeled through because it was just like, how can I like be edgy and bold, because that's like half my brand is like being a little bit edgy and still bring this soulfulness into it, right? So it's all about like bringing that tapped and turned on wealthy AF energy into our business and life. And then, yeah, where else? Yeah, that's the main places, but Instagram's usually a good place because everything's linked there anyway.
Awesome. Well, it's funny because imagine when you said that you're edgy, like imagine like being badass and then like spiritual at the same time, like,
yeah.
that, sense of grace, but then also you're badass.
Yeah. And it's funny because like in human design, I'm a manifester. I'm a 4/6 manifester splenic. My purpose is like incarnation cross and with gene keys and stuff is very like edgy and bold and like helping people with abundance and intuition and everything. And then my horoscopes is I'm like Libra sun, Libra moon, Cancer rising, like super nurturing, super like loving, romantic, feminine. And I so identify with that. Like, and I find myself, I'm so in the middle of this, like, I'm so edgy, but I'm just so like chill as well. And I love it. I'm here for both. I'm here for the science and the woo woo. I'm here for the magic of all perspectives.
Yeah. And for those listening, I mean, we all have so many different layers, which is why I love bringing on so many different guests like that have this beauty of like embodying all these different colors and flavors and all that stuff. So thank you so much, Viola, for hanging out with me and chatting and putting on your mask and being vulnerable with us. It's such a pleasure. And I'm just so excited for people to learn more about you and go on your journey with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun doing this.